Okay, so this is the third part in the multicellular primary producers videos, talking about multicellular algae, the reds, the greens, the browns, and then the plants associated with the marine ecosystem. And as we mentioned in the last one, marine plants have to deal with salt issues, salt water. Most plants are dependent upon fresh water, but marine plants have adapted strategies and structural features that enable them to survive in salt water or on the edge of salt water. So they have a pretty tough environment to survive in, but some plants have evolved those adaptations. So we talked about the seagrasses, and then we also talked about the marsh plants or the salt marsh plants, and we left off with the mangroves. So we talked about red mangroves. That's where we left off. Red mangroves grow right on the shore. They create islands. They have adaptations to survive with salt water around them. Now, once the red mangroves establish land, they trap sediment and they collect sediment out of the water. And as their leaves fall, they get trapped in the roots, and then they decompose and they build up this organic matter. Once they build up enough of it, then we'll see the next type of mangrove showing up. So if we go a little further inland from the shore, we will see black mangroves. Now, when we look at a black mangrove, they will live second from the water. So they're not right on the edge, they're back a little bit. But they're still in an area that during high tide it might get a lot of water into it. So you get a lot of salt water, or during storm season, things like that. So what black mangroves have are these specialized root systems called pneumatophores. These are the picture below here. They look like little sticks poking up out of the ground. Those are pneumatophores, root structures that enable the black mangrove to access oxygen. All right, they're living in an environment that's not real pleasant. There's not a lot of oxygen there in the soil and available for the plants that way, so they can derive it through that root system. So plants need some oxygen for cellular respiration to occur, especially in the root system. So the black mangroves have that unique feature, little roots, or what we call pneumatophores, that stick up above the soil to get the oxygen. Their leaves will actually excrete salt. So if you look at the picture on the right here, the leaves of the black mangrove, that white stuff, that's actually salt. So it's parallel to when we go and we exercise and we sweat a lot and all this salt comes out of our skin and you can feel the salt crusting on your face. Black mangroves do that. They excrete salt. They get rid of the salt through little pores in their leaves and it allows them to live in this environment that has a certain level of salt. The seeds are going to be oval shaped. So you can see picture bottom right, it's got some mangrove seeds, some black mangrove seeds, very different than what we see with the red mangroves. Those seeds will float, but they drop in the water. They can't float and start a new island because they don't tip down and grab onto the sand. What they can do is float around, and then when the tide goes down and the island area that the black mangroves are in, when that dries out because the tide's lowered, then those seeds can dig into the sand and germinate in a different location. So floating seeds are good, but the black mangrove seeds work differently than the red mangrove seeds. Okay, so this is the second mangrove you'll see as you walk from the shore inland and you start moving inland. Go a little further and we get into the white mangroves. Now what we'll see with white mangroves, they live third from the water's edge. Okay, so you got to go red mangroves, black mangroves, white. Red, black, white. We get to the white mangroves, and what we'll see is they kind of take, it's interesting, is they kind of take some features from both red and black. These guys can grow prop roots and pneumatophores. So they kind of take tricks from both red and black mangroves, use those to be able to adapt and survive in the third position from the water's edge. Now the leaves are very thick. They're going to be a lot thicker, kind of leathery, real tough, and they will have pores on the bottom of the leaf. Now those pores allow exchange of oxygen, exchange of gases, things like that. The leathery top surface traps moisture, tries to hold moisture in and retain moisture. They're far enough inland that they don't have the same salt issues or the same level of salt issues as the black mangrove. They still have to deal with salt in the environment, but just not nearly the concentration that the blacks deal with, or the reds for sure. The reds deal with an incredibly salty environment. The other adaptation and feature, if you look at the picture on the right, the white mangroves will produce these little things called nectaries. These are little, kind of like little buds of nutrients, sugar packets that are right at the base of the leaf. And what these will do is they act as a food source for ants. So when we talk about reproduction, flowering plants, pollen, and egg, well, you got to get the pollen over to the egg. A lot of flowering plants use animals as pollinators. Well, the white mangroves, ants. So you draw the ants in with some food. Oh, hey, here's some sugar, here's some energy, here's some food. And while you're here, why don't you check out my flowers? And then they go into the flowers, they crawl all over the plants, they help pollination, and both species benefit. Mutualistic relationship, mutualism. Okay, so white mangroves are third in line from the shore. So red, black, white. The fourth mangrove, and some people argue these are not truly mangroves, others say yes they are, but the fourth is the gray mangroves. Some folks will refer to these as buttonwood trees. So either term will be completely interchangeable. When we look at them, they're the furthest inland, fourth from the shore. Red, black, white, and then gray, or buttonwood. The leaves are long and pointy, gray in color, and the leaves will actually have salt excreting glands to help rid themselves of salt, similar to what we saw in the black mangroves. But the color of the leaves are usually the best indicator, and it's the bottom of the leaf that's going to be that gray color. But long, pointy, not nearly as thick and leathery as the other mangroves we were looking at, but salt excreting glands that help get rid of the salt from them. And the leaves feel like velvet. So if you guys have ever touched velvet, it's really soft and very soft texture. That's what the leaves feel like. Seeds, very different. You got these little pods here that contain a bunch of seeds in there. So when they get carried away by birds or other animals and then dropped, it helps the gray mangrove or buttonwoods reproduce. All right, so fourth in line when we look at shore, from the shore going in. All right, so here's just the overall zonation. Think about the tide. Reds are constantly in water. Blacks are usually in water during high tide, and then low tide they're dry, high tide they're wet. Thus the advantage of the pnematophores. Whites really don't get much water on them. They don't get a lot of water coming in, maybe a little bit during high tide, but not much. And then the buttonwoods or grays way up here, they should never be inundated with salt. There's still going to be salt in the air, in the environment, but definitely not soaked and inundated with salt water at any point on a normal day. You know, again, a flood, a tropical storm, yeah, buttonwoods are going to get wet. But then when the storm's gone, water drains away, buttonwoods go back to being dry. All right, so mangroves are incredibly, incredibly important. Let me to just emphasize this. I got to add a few of these here. They have an incredible value to the marine ecosystem. Okay, so they reduce wave damage. As big waves come in, those trees slow it down. That storm surge During hurricanes and tropical storms, mangroves buffer the storm surge. They can build land and form islands. Islands that don't have mangroves or have had their mangroves cut down disappear very quickly, especially if there's a big storm event. Nursery. Oh my God, this is so critical. It's estimated about 75% of the fish that live out on that reef will go into the mangroves and give birth. Sharks, barracudas, sergeant majors, clownfish, we go Indo-Pacific. Like I said, we'll see so many fish, juveniles living in the mangroves. You lose those mangroves, you lose your reproductive environment, and the reef diversity starts to collapse. Okay, so that's just absolutely one of the most important factors of these mangroves and these mangrove forests. The primary productivity is off the charts when we look at the amount of energy at the producer base in the mangroves. I mean, it's unbelievable how much energy is stored in the mangroves. And then water purification, as water comes from land, fresh water comes through the mangroves, it slows it down, it filters it out, it cleans it, so there's less toxin and less pollutants going out into the marine system. It helps decrease eutrophication events and those algae blooms we talked about in the previous lectures. So time and time again, when we see people remove mangroves because, well, we want a pretty white beach, we want to get rid of these because they're stinky, they're smelly, they got lots of insects, the environment starts to degrade quickly. Not just the onshore environment, but the offshore environment as well. The reef connected to where those mangroves were, that starts to degrade very quickly. And the challenge is lots of people are developing coastal areas, buying up mangroves because it's cheap. Who wants it? They're coming in, bulldozing it all down, clearing it all out, putting up big resorts, and it's degrading the entire marine ecosystem. So they have so much value that it's unbelievable. And unfortunately, we call them mangrove forests, are one of the most highly endangered habitats on Earth. And we'll talk more about this when we get into the marine ecology side of the course. But I just can't stress enough how important these systems are when we're looking at the marine ecosystem. Even though it's not out in the middle of the ocean or it's not right at the reef, it's unbelievably important. Okay? All right, so an easy way to go over the key features here, Table 6.1. All right, so blow it up, copy it, print it off, make flashcards, whatever you want to do. How do we tell the distinguishing features of green algae, brown, reds, and then the flowering plants? What photosynthetic pigments are tied to each group? What is the food reserve or storage energy, the way they store their excess energy, their cell walls, things like that, and then the ecology aspect of those particular groups. All right, so lots of good stuff going on here when we look at the primary productivity and the producer base in the marine ecosystem, because without the producers, whether they're single-celled or these multicellular ones, we don't have any animals. We don't have clownfish, we don't have sharks, we don't have whales, we don't have dolphins, we don't have all those things if the producer base is messed up. So we want to always keep an eye on the producer base, make sure it's safe, healthy, and functional.